The never-ending adaptations of Jane Austen novels into movies continues. Persuasion is directed by Carrie Cracknell and stars Dakota Johnson, Cosmo Jarvis, and Henry Golding, and is based upon the Jane Austen novel of the same name. And in this movie, Anne, played by Dakota Johnson, meets back up with a former lover, Captain Wentworth, played by Cosmo James, after she was in the past persuaded to break up with him by a friend of the family. She now tries to fight, having new feelings for him, while new people begin to emerge and new problems arise in her family. So I think that this film is probably the 1,001st time we have seen one of these books turn into a movie. And I think after a certain point, they keep coming so often that you have to put your own mark on it. Otherwise, it becomes something that we've seen before or falls into the exact same stereotypes and tropes as most films are from this era. And I think, for the most part, this movie doesn't do a very good job at it. This film is not really what it's trying to be. There's a clear vision of what this film is striving for and what it is going to try to become, but it never quite reaches that point. It constantly falls short and seems to be something that is trying to reinvent itself so much that in the process it becomes too self-aware and fails to be something that we haven't seen before. But let's not talk about all the negatives. Let's talk about everyone in this movie. Dakota Johnson as Anne offers a surprisingly good performance. I think that she, considering all the hate she gets, did a great job. I think that, yes, she may have done, the 50 Shades things in the past and not necessarily done the best films, and this by no means is a good film, but I think her performance is something to be admired in this film. Her performance is very good. She mixes modern with classic just right. And I think she plays Anne very well. She may be, as far as I'm concerned, one of my favorite Annes. Now that may sound crazy, but I've seen so many versions of this at this point that I could pretty much probably rank Jane Austen novels by this point, movie adaptations, because there's so many of them. She does a great job. She genuinely emotes what she needs to. Her emotions seem very real. Everything is great. Her warmth, her humanity, and most of all, the vulnerability. I really liked her in this movie. I think she did a fantastic job. Cosmo Jarvis is okay. He does a pretty good job with what he needs to do, and it's serviceable, but that's about all it is. It seems like he played the essential, if you wrote this character on paper and you have bullet points, he hit all those bullet points. But that's about all as much as we're going to get from him. Henry Golding, I feel, goes a little too over the top with this performance. He seems like he should have been just maybe contained a little bit more. His performance is a little too large and is a little too huge and a little too for my personal taste. But this movie doesn't so much suffer from the performances as much as it suffers from being bland. There is not a lot of life to this movie. It is something that is just, again, so tired, and you can feel the fatigue coming off of the screen. There are genuine moments and segments of this film where you can feel what they're going for. You see it, and then I love it, and I think it's really good, and they change certain things. But I don't feel this is different enough to really stand out as something that is, worth everyone spending their time on Netflix to go watch. It's just kind of average. It's something that I feel like during Valentine's Day season, you'd be scrolling through channels and it would pop up, and it'd be this kind of cheap movie you watch with your date, and you're kind of like, that was entertaining, but that's about as far as this movie ever gets. It's just not to the level that it ever should have been. Not to think that I ever thought it was going to be. I kind of thought it was going to be to begin with. There's a lot of creative choices in here, especially the way Anne lets us in on her thoughts throughout the movie that I think were kind of well thought out. There were good ideas there, but they don't necessarily play out the best. Most ideas in this movie that seem to have something behind them don't necessarily play out as well as they could, and that is a giant negative for this film. This film is by no means bad. It's just such a average, slow watch, and if you've seen any film like these before, you're probably going to end up okay. There's just not a lot to be said about this movie. There's not anything hugely horrible about it or great about it. It's just a film that I'm pretty sure will come and go, and very soon no one will remember it because it just doesn't live up to anything that would have needed to do to stand out. Like, for instance, I am a huge fan of the 1995 miniseries Pride and Prejudice. And that thing is still considered probably, I'd say, one of the top two, like, absolute definition. Like, that is the film. That's the epitome of a Jane Austen novel because it was able to do so much. But this never does that. And I think that's very disappointing. I think it suffers from what appears to be a lower budget, and it could have used a little more. And I think with better people involved in this, it might have worked. But in the version that we got, it does not work at all. I'm going to give Persuasion a 4 out of 10. So thank you guys so much, as always, for watching. I appreciate all of you, and I will see you next time.